Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. It's been a while since we had one of these, so I'm really excited to be back and be doing this. Alhamdulillah. Today we're going to be going over The Bravelearner by Julie Bogart, Chapter 6, The Four Ports of Entry. How many of you got to read the chapter or implement a lot of the stuff in it? Okay, great. So we're going to keep this really interactive as we always do. So I'll be mentioning some stuff mentioned in the book, and I'd love to have a discussion and for you to mention what you learned or your experiences with some of the things that were mentioned in the book, or just even something you want to add to it, even from like an Islamic perspective. I would love that. So today we're talking about the four ports of entry, and something that she said. Something that she mentioned was that we expect our kids to make us feel comfortable in the world, when in truth, it's our responsibility to do that for them. Now, I found this so relevant, first and foremost in our deen. It's our job to watch our children and to lead them. And in a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said that every one of you is a shepherd and is questioned about their flock. The leader of a people is a guardian and is questioned about his subjects. And a man is the guardian of his family and is questioned about them. A woman is the guardian of her husband's home and his children, and she is questioned about them. So one of our tasks is to explore all the ways that children learn and grow as children and be their shepherd, help them to lead, lead them and help them to figure out their place in this world. And a lot of times, as our children grow, it's also our job to introduce them to the world and bring it to their fingertips in different ways and through different ports. Now, I know that's something that I always remind myself of, is that I'm raising my kid into who they're naturally meant to be, not who I want them to be or who I picture them to be. But it's my job to kind of figure out who they are, what are their natural talents, what are they good at, and kind of work with that. So how do we lead our children? How do we teach them? And in this chapter in the book, we go through the 4 points of entry for how they can gain new information and new ideas. And the ports of entry allow our children to bring meaning to their education all the way inside of them. One thing I read recently was I've been reading Boys Adrift by Leonard Sachs. I know a lot of you might have read it before. One thing that he mentions is how in English, there's only one word for the word no, while in other languages, there's many uses of the word no. For example, my second language is Urdu. So we can say, if I know someone, it's a different word. It's like मैं जानता हूं तुम्हारे को, like I just know someone. I know of them, I know about them. But something like knowing about a whole topic, that word is different. That word can be like talim, and knowing everything about that thing. And what I found really interesting about that was the 4 ports of entry really help us to really know by using different senses and using multisensory ways in order to learn something and to really have a true knowledge of something. So that's what we're kind of be going over, the ports and how we can tap into so many different ways in helping our children to learn. So the first port we're going to talk about is looking for the mind at work. Now, we tend to value the mind. We look for evidence of learning that is advanced or surprisingly mature for the age of our child. I had this encounter this weekend, actually, which was, I was kind of hesitant to share it, but I'm going to share it anyways, because I think it's really important to know. We actually had a family wedding this weekend, and we had a bunch of people over, and someone asked my kids, they took my older daughter and my son, and they're like, which one of you is smarter? And I hated that question. And my kids just were taken aback. They're like, wait, they were just quiet, right? And so my daughter didn't say anything. And my son's like, well, I guess I'm a little bit better in math. And the reason I hated that question, but I loved how my kids answered it, was because what does that mean to be smarter, right? What are we valuing when we say what is smarter? Essentially, we tend to value the mind, and we look for things that make us look like we're more academically advanced than another child of the same age, for example, right? But we learn that that's not what education and learning is about. Education can't be quantified, right? And especially as homeschoolers, we're not only in charge of our kids' academics, but we're also in charge of their well-being, their health, their character and mannerisms. That's a big one in our household. Survival skills, can they do the dishes? Can they do their laundry? Anything else that you guys can think I'm missing here, you can either comment on IG or comment in the chat box, or you can take the floor. But what are some other things that, you think that you're in charge of for your child? What do you guys think? Okay. So there are so many things that we are in charge of, right? And our job with the mind is to be aware of the different types of intelligence and figure out how we're supposed to teach our child all these things that we're responsible for, but in the way that our child can actually learn. And the best example I can give is that there's so many different ways of memorizing, for example. A lot of us have our children memorizing surahs, maybe not to become hafiz, but just to memorize some small surah and things like that. And I found, at least with my kids, that there's even different ways to memorize. I have one kid who they can memorize just by listening. I put on the same surah or the same Quranic ayah multiple times, and they'll just listen, and then that's it. They'll know it like that. I have another kid who I can put it on millions of times and they'll never get it. They'll have to read it. Now, if they read it, let's say 10 times, they'll get it just by looking at it. And I figured out that, okay, I have an auditory learner, I have a visual learner. Now I have another kid who neither of those things work. And we're still trying to figure out what it is that helps them to work. But I think that's a great example of showing how each kid is so different. Each kid has a different way of learning. And one of our jobs is to figure out in their minds on how they work. And now learning also happens in so many different ways. And it's not only tied to what she says specifically in the book is that learning is not only tied to reading thick old books, writing serious academic essays, and advancing in mathematics. Today it is just as critical to be innovative, to collaborate, and to imagine. Now, it might not look the way you want it to, but it's working in its own way. She also said that we tend to undervalue what comes naturally to our children and family culture. And I think now more than ever, with so many people homeschooling and remote schooling or virtual schooling, I've gotten this question so many times from so many parents asking about homeschooling. They always ask me, how do you quantify what they learned? Or how do you know what they learned in a day was enough? Or what they learned in a week was enough? Now, I've answered this so many different times, but I wanted to hear all your opinions. Like, what are your viewpoints? How would you answer this? How do you know that what they learn is enough? Does anyone want to chime in?
Hi, Ayesha. This is Angie.
Hi, Angie.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. So for me, the way I figure out how within one day, for example, if I've done enough, my kids will always let me know, and I'm really huge on small, consistent. Long-term is more effective than forcing them to do a whole bunch in one day and then it doesn't sustain. So that's one way I know that what, we've done enough. If you're done and you're still happy and you're not overwhelmed, that's how I know you've done enough for that day.
I love that. That's a great way, because probably after that point they probably won't even learn anything, right? That's great. Anyone else want to talk about how they know when the day is done? Zara, do you want to go ahead?
Assalamualaikum. For us, we kind of have like I think this might be Julie's term too, but the minimally viable day, where okay, I know if we hit these couple of things, like in any way, it could be even an informal way. Okay, maybe we didn't do math, but we played like a card game that involved math. And reading, maybe the kids read like a comic book or something. Like for those tough days, the days when the kids really aren't into it, I'm not into it, we had that minimally viable day where we did something that was enjoyable but all educational, and we just kind of call it a day at that.
That's a great way. I love that. If that what Zara said was like, if you just like play a game or something, or if you just played cards, then you know that you actually accomplished something that day. I love that. Teacher Mabit on IG said that I asked them to teach their younger siblings. that's a great thing too, because that still counts, right? I know even teaching or collaborating is also a technique that we also need to teach our kids. And so there are so many things that, so many ways that we can quote unquote quantify without actually having worksheets done. I'm going to call out one of my friends right now who's not here right now, but I know she was reading one of Julie's techniques of doing copy work, and she was saying how her daughter hated writing, wouldn't write anything, but then she found she gave her some dry erase markers and told her to write on the window, and her daughter all of a sudden became this wonderful writer, and she didn't even complain once after writing on the window. But the problem was that she couldn't take that writing on the window and put it in a binder to show how she improved over time with her writing. I think it's more a problem for us parents to kind of see how they progress than it is for them, right? Like, so it's definitely an adult issue. One of the things that she mentions in the book is to make a journal and record the date and activity and what you notice about your child's mind at work. Has anyone tried this? Has anyone kind of just taken the time to just see, to write down little things like that? Like, oh, they shared today, or I don't know, like they realized something when we were out at the grocery store, they did some mental math. Has anyone used that kind of journaling?
I had just started a journaling this last month, so I'll see how I can keep up with it. But I really enjoy doing it. Like just before I go to bed, that's one of the things that I want to do. Just look back in my day and see, the good times I had with my children and mistakes I made, stuff like that.
Oh, Ishana, that's wonderful. Wow, that's really good. I like that. So it's not just a journal about what they did, but how you even interacted with them.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea. Actually, that's when we have those bad days, that's a good thing to kind of look back on and see, actually, we're allowed to have one bad day, so we can go back and, notice all those good days that we did have. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Even once there was a day that, like in the evening, I had a hard time with something. But when I started writing journal, I just started it just came to my mind, like all the good things that I was doing in the morning,
Yeah.
So I tell myself, okay, I'm not a bad mom.
That's awesome. So the next point we're going to be going over is looking for a body on the move. I love this one. I absolutely love this one, especially because I have a kid that is more jittery than my other 3 kids combined. So this one is huge in our house. But she mentions in the book that bodies are meant to expend energy. One of the huge advantages of home education is that we can accommodate a child's need to move. And then I specifically love this one because actually I'm going to mention why I love this one in a little bit. What I did want to mention was the Student Coalition for Action and Literacy Education asserts that the average focused attention span for kids in the child's chronological age plus 1 minute. Now let's let that seep in, because I know when I posted this to my Instagram, I had so many people had so many thoughts about this. It was so interesting. So basically, like, I have a 10-year-old who's like 5th grade. So which means that her focus attention is 11 minutes. Now, how many kids would sit, like, have a subject that only lasts 11 minutes? That usually never happens. What do you guys think about this, about the focus attention? When you first heard it, do you think that was kind of crazy? Like, if you have a 9-year-old, their focus attention is 10 minutes. Any thoughts at all? Now, she also mentions that how to work with that is that productivity, it turns out, is related to how well a person can rotate through the focus attention, take a body break, and re-up cycle. That's so important, because if your focus attention is only, let's say, 9 minutes, you need to know how to come back to it. And that's kind of what we need to do, is to kind of help them figure out how they can come back to it. Amy Ali mentioned that her son is having a hard time with that. Yeah, with the movements, right? Now, I read this chapter and I kind of changed how we did things because of it. And that's why I really love this chapter, and I really love, like, the movement. And I'll give you an example for memorization of Qur'an, for example, right? Or for like skip counting or anything that you can go like back and forth with, we combine 2 subjects. And by subjects, I mean, we combine their sports practice, which we kind of, we schedule a lot of their sports practices within our schedule, meaning our personal practice that we do at home. And so what I had my son do was he needed to practice throwing and catching for baseball. So we both got our mitts out and I would throw the ball back and forth with him. And every time he was only allowed to throw to me if he could recite an ayah of the surah that he was memorizing. Then he would throw it to me. I would recite the next ayah, throw it back to him, and then he would recite the next one, and we would keep going back and forth. Now he had so many sensations working, right? He was like throwing, he was like physically moving, but his mind was working because he had to memorize. It was great. I like didn't, after I read this, I tried it and it worked. Like he didn't even complain. He just did it, you know? And then we started using it for like skip counting. Are there any other examples people, you guys can mention of like ways we can use this movement for? I know I said skip counting and memorization, but I'm sure there's like so many others.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine. Her son was completing his her son was completing his hifz, and he was very much that type that he completed when he was about maybe 13, 14 years old. And so as he was memorizing, he needed to move a lot. Like he couldn't just sit and recite to her. So she would just have him on his rollerblades in the garage or in the driveway or whatever. So when he would have to recite his juz or whatever his review was, he would be rollerblading around, in the backyard or driveway or whatever it is. And she said that helped him tremendously because he would just like completely lose focus when he was sitting. But as long as he was physically moving his body and still able to like, it's not like he's playing basketball or something like where he can't recite properly or whatever. But, as long as he was able to move, it helped him a great deal. Yeah, it really worked for him.
That's great. I know Teacher Mabed mentioned hopscotch. That's a great one, especially if you make, instead of numbers, you put other stuff on there. That's great. Okay, and then this Boyful Home mentioned you could do math facts, you could do spelling. Oh, I didn't even think about spelling. Spelling's a good one. Zara mentioned that her son likes arm wrestling with her between problems. I love it. I wonder if you let him win, but that's great. These are some great ideas. I know there's a lot more mentioned in the book. But movement is so important. We actually have these stools that actually roll. They're not meant to roll, but they're made out of like these spools. And so the kids will literally balance themselves on it while they're like doing stuff. And I'm totally okay with that. The more movement, as long as you're kind of focusing what we're doing, go for it. I have my, so it's such a great thing, movement in general now. Oh, my kids also read backwards on the sofa. I say, go for it. They pace when they have to do math problems. Go for it. The best thing you can do is ask your kids, like, what helps you concentrate, what works for you, and then, be okay with it. Zara mentioned the wiggle seat. Oh, okay. I've heard of it, but I've never actually, I've never looked into it more. The wiggle seat. I think I've seen some classrooms with it. That sounds like fun. Okay. And then she mentioned that occupational therapists recommend the wiggle seat highly. That's interesting. Okay, and then Amy mentioned that she got a balance board and a hopping block so they can do that between classes. That's great. So what I'm saying is between classes and in class, just movement all around, inshallah. Okay, anything else someone want to add about the movement as a port of entry?
I had one. I don't know if you guys mentioned this, but we did spelling with soccer. So one of my sons would kick a soccer ball at the base. You know how the base of a couch is hard? So every letter he would kick the soccer ball to spell words.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, they're in high school now, but it was a long time ago.
That's a great idea. I should do that.
They have good aim. You don't want the ball flying.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sure have good aim.
That's true. This Boyful Home mentioned that her kids play with Legos during read-alouds and audiobooks. Yeah, my kids do the same. We do Legos for everything, basically. So Legos is a great way. Farial, Angie wants to know if your couch is okay.
Yeah, our couch is okay. It's okay where the ball hit, but other places it's not okay.
So for anyone on IG, if you haven't heard, Farial mentioned that she has her kids kick a soccer ball onto the couch on the bottom part that's hard as they do spelling for each letter. So that's a really good way as well. Okay,
They just
great.
actually made that up, honestly. I didn't like invent that. We just happened to have a ball in the house and they were doing spelling and it just kind of
Isn't it
happened.
even better when they invent it themselves though?
Yeah.
I think that's the best. Okay, so port 3 is looking for a heart connected. Now I'm gonna need all your help with this one because I was kind of like, I don't know. Actually, no, I think it was the next one that I needed some help with. But for the heart connected, she mentions in the book that love in learning blossoms when a child has both a coach, someone giving meaningful input to grow a skill, and an ally, someone supportive during struggle. And this is always one of the beauties of homeschooling, right? It's kind of like a tailor-made education. You're not just a teacher, you're also the parent, you're a friend. Half the time you're a classmate because you're learning right alongside them because you have no idea what's going on half the time. Okay, maybe that's just me, I don't know. But a lot of their science and history and stuff like that, I'm like, man, I never knew that, I never learned that before. But we also rely a lot on others. We rely on coaches, co-op teachers, and we try to find the support that they need, and that's so important. She also mentions she says that ripping through the lesson with ease creates the opportunity for a love connection to bloom. I love this. It's so important. I know when my kids were one of my kids when they were younger, we did a lot of Odd Squad, and I think Odd Squad is like the best math curriculum for elementary years ever, to be honest. And I remember one of the lessons was about a dozen, and they had to like learn. And I was like reading the time, like, okay, so today we're gonna learn about a dozen. And my kid was like, oh yeah, I already know. Dozen means 12. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I guess we're done for the day. And he's like, wait, that's it? I'm like, yeah, we're done. And that's a celebration right there. We don't have to not do the lesson and go on to the next one, right? We can celebrate the fact that you already know it. Great, you get some time off. And just that feeling that he got, just that happiness that, oh yeah, I do already know it. This is great. It gives plenty of time for enjoying having learned something already. And I absolutely love that because sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we see it as, oh, free time, let's move on. But no, let's take a step back and let them enjoy the fact that they already know something. Does anyone want to share a story about any success stories of how your kid already knew something, you just kind of backed off, or didn't back off, and maybe it backfired? Well, success and joy in one subject spills into the rest of your education. You know those days where your kid wakes up and it's a bad day and you know it from the start, and then every subject they do today, it just kind of drags. Well, the same goes for if we start our day and we have a really good subject, even one good subject that your kid excels in, it definitely shows in other areas. And so, magically, all the other subjects become easier as well. I know I definitely see this in our schooling, at least. Now, most of us here would say that we want our kids to love learning, right? Anyone who would not say that, half of us, I think most of us would say, I would love for my kid to love learning, and then I want them to learn because they love it, right? But we also have to remember that children are also drawn to what is appropriately challenging, taking things slow and within the limits of what our child can do. Now, when they tackle a new challenge, it's a good reminder for us to always be kind, admire their efforts. What else can you think of? What else can we do to encourage them when they're faced with some sort of challenge, either academic or not? Besides the two that I mentioned, which is being kind and admiring their efforts. Because every new lesson is almost a new challenge for them, technically, if it's something they haven't learned before.
I would say maybe breaking things into smaller chunks if it's hard, or even taking days off from that topic if they find it challenging, like skip a day and come back to it.
That's a great idea. Breaking it up into chunks and taking breaks. That's so important. Sometimes we feel like taking breaks is going to bring us back, but it really does help. Does anyone want to mention anything else?
I would also maybe add, sorry, did I interrupt?
No, go ahead, Angie.
I would also add, if you feel like they're moving forward, but it's not super hard for them, that's not a bad thing. I don't know if I'm being clear or like if that makes any sense, but like from what I've noticed from my kids is like a lot of times, we'll be going through say math lesson after math lesson and they're getting it and we're moving along and it's fine. And I feel like, maybe this is a little below your level, or maybe you could be doing a little bit more challenging work, but they're learning and they're moving forward. But because it's not like, whatever 3 grade levels above them or super like complicated looking math, you almost kind of second guess yourself, like, oh, am I doing you a disservice because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because you're not doing like calculus level math at second grade, you know what I mean? Because that's
Right.
it's kind of like the image we get sometimes with homeschooling is that like I'm going to be able to like help them soar through all subjects and they're going to be like college level kindergartners, you know,
Yes.
kind of thing. So, you know, the fact that they're going forward but not, you know, like they're moving forward, but it's not so hard that it's like a challenge and they're pulling their hair out every single day. They're able to do it and they complete it within a, you know, appropriate amount of time and they move forward. I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's like kind of a big indicator for me.
That's great, especially because, you know, you need to go at the pace of your child. You know, I think that's really important. Dima mentioned that pointing out the portion that they did get right. That's so true. Not just reflecting on the negatives, but pointing out the positives. This Boyful Home mentioned that this happened to her this week. She got all revved up to start her brain studies, and it turns out the kids had already torn through a comic book about the brain and had all kinds of answers. I guess you were learning this time, right? And then Teacher Mabed mentioned that, yes, letting them taste success, so important. Because if you can feel how wonderful it is to like succeed in something or like accomplish a challenge, it's such a good feeling. You want to do it again and again, right? So that's so great. Okay, so let's continue. So basically it's like providing help when needed. And if they, even if like sometimes if they need a tutor outside of your teaching, or if they need a coach or a separate program, or dare I say, you need to change your entire curriculum, you need to be open to this, and you need to bring, you know, present learning that suits them and their needs and what, and, you know, and what works. So how can we stage the home for a love of learning? You can do it yourself. If they're having trouble with something, then you do it first, you exemplify it. You give lots of time to practice that new skill, and you notice and you comment. This Boyful Home mentioned that I think sometimes simply acknowledging their struggles are valid helps a lot too. That's so true. Just saying, yeah, it's hard, and even sometimes if it just sucks, well, yeah, it does. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing. There's also something that we're always reminded of, especially with kids who play sports, for example. The coaches always tell the parents, no matter how your player did in a game, you never go in the car ride home and start rattling off what they did right or wrong. And this is a very hard thing to do because either in the game or after the game, all you want to say is, well, you should have done this or you should have done that. And what we have to remember is that that's not what's on their mind at that time. They just care that their game is done, right? And the same can go for education. If they finish a math worksheet or a writing assignment, sometimes you want to resist the urge to correct it right away or comment on how they did on it, like right that second. Maybe you can save it for later or prepare a completely different activity the next day that'll maybe complement what you want to see different, instead of just you know, coaching from the sidelines and just telling them right then and there, because sometimes that's not what they need, or that's not something what they want. Does anyone else want to add anything for port 3? Okay. So for the next port, like I said, I'm gonna need your help for this one. This was looking for a spirit inspired. It was kind of about how the passions your children have, that's a part of their spirit. And different kids have different passions, but I think this chapter specifically was talking about a lot of doing charity and morals, values, characters, and things like that. But I want to hear from all of you, what are some of your kids' passions? What are some things that they're really into? Because I think it'd be interesting to hear. Okay, so Angie said that her kids are really into dragons. That's a good one. I think I've heard that one before, Angie, from you. I guess they're still into it.
I'll go next. One of my kids is really into like crafting, and it's like there's a tween crafting person on YouTube. I can't remember her name right now, but she takes squishy dolls and then she like paints over them and adds stuff to it. I don't know if you guys have tween girls, anybody else, but I forget her name. Mariah something. Anyway,
Squishy
so
doll.
her desk.
Is that what you said?
She's what?
You said squishy dolls, right?
Yeah, squishy dolls. But the person that does it on YouTube, she's like pretty famous, and I think she's a teenager, maybe. Her name's Mariah something. But anyway, so she likes to do that type of stuff. And I just kind of gave her a space in her room, like a desk, and that desk always has stuff on it, like not just like craft, but it has paint and slime and there's always stuff happening there. Like yesterday there was like fabric with like sewing needles in like a pile of like slimy paint that was in a seashell. And I was just like,
Wow.
and in one of the I know one of the Bravelearner those webinars, Melissa Wiley one, she said give the kids a space, and my daughter overheard it because we were all listening to it, and she said give them a space where they can just do whatever, their mess, their craft, and don't like say anything about it, don't like judge them, and don't tell them to clean it up. And so now I'm kind of resisting. Yesterday she like cut up fabric and hot glued a face mask for a bear. So I don't know, there's always stuff coming out of there. And so for a long time, I used to get the desk. It used to be downstairs in like our common area, but it was never ever clean. And it was like this, but like, 3 years ago, 3 years ago. So it was a little bit smaller scale of messy. And then I realized, we should just take it upstairs because I can't keep telling her to clean this up. And so obviously the crafting has gotten deeper and more expansive. So I just kind of like walk away from it. It's actually next to a bunk bed, and the bottom bunk is my younger daughter. So I saw on her sheets there was like paint, and I was like, okay, we're just gonna have to get new sheets or something. Let's just figure it out. Like maybe I told her put like a plastic bag so you don't get stuff on your sister's bed, because she wouldn't like that. But yeah.
It's so great that you're supporting it in such a great way, even with the big mess.
Well, mostly I'm ignoring it because that's what I need to do to support it, is just to not go there and not look at it. But
ignoring it is part of you supporting it, right?
Yes.
That's great. Okay, some of the other passions people mentioned were Legos. I think that's like in most households. Harry Potter, Star Wars, cooking, and it was mentioned that some kids cook better than they do. That sounds like my kids as well. Drawing. What else do I see up here? Oh, comics. These are some great ones. I know this year my kids, when I asked them, what do you want to do this year? Like, what's one thing you'd want to like learn or focus on? And the first thing my kids said that we want to learn about survival skills, like outdoor survival. I'm like, okay, like we're big. They're big on camping and stuff like that. So then I was like, okay, well, give me some more ideas. Like, what are you thinking? And then the one thing they said was that we want to go into the woods with just a bobby pin, some metals, sticks, and a water filter. And then that's it. And learn how to survive for like a day or two. I'm like, okay. So we are learning to work on that. We're planning some trips and that. So maybe, I don't know if I'm going to send them with just those 4 materials, but let's see what happens. Let's see what we come up with from that. Okay. It's also, and I'm just going to read some quotes from this chapter, because again, this chapter was a lot about their passions, but also a lot of their characters, mannerisms, charity, things like that. Sadaqah actually was I felt it was a very Islamic chapter. But she says that your most natural behaviors ring truest to your children, meaning if you want, I think everyone knows this, like where you see your best and worst self in your kids, right? She also says, if we want our kids to value the needs of others, we must value our children's needs first, exemplifying that behavior. And when children experience the loving care of their parents, they learn how to care for others. And she also says that novels give us access to points of view and ethical dilemmas, as well as a wider lens to understand the globe. This I found to be so true last year. I know we joined the Brave Writer Arrow subscription last year. How many of you are doing it, by the way, this year? I know there might be a few of you are doing the Arrow subscription through Brave Writer. Okay. So we did this for the first time last year, and it was amazing. I'm not even talking about because hundreds of people were reading the same book as you and doing all these things, but I thought it was amazing because these were books I've never read, and they were so diverse in themes, and the characters were just so great. Like I felt like I taught my kids so many morals and values from these books. Characterism, like how to become a stronger person, from girl and boy perspectives. There's just so much that I can do. Oh, great. So it looks like a few of you doing Arrow or Dart this year. So that's wonderful. That's why I was excited to do it again this year, because I was like, just the book selection, it's not something I could have picked on my own. Not with that diversity and not with what was being taught in each of those books. It's always something different, but amazing. And lastly, she says, give love, give attention, and give help. and choose to support your child's cause in a visible way. And I think Faryal gave the best example of by letting them have their mess, what they don't think is a mess, what we think is a mess. I think that's a visibly showing that you're supporting their cause. I think that's great. What are some other ways that we can support our children in a visibly? Any suggestions? Okay. Or if there's any questions, this is usually, that was it for this chapter, for chapter 6, the ports of entry. But if anyone wants to mention any other questions they have about the book or homeschooling or anything at all, there's so many seasoned homeschoolers on here. There's so much help going, there's so many amazing resources here right now.
I have a question.
Yes.
So my kids, they're really into like imagining stories, and like if they get into like, let's say if they watched a video of Sophia the First or Thomas and Friends, like they want to act it out, and they'll just play with the stories, like they'll just keep on going. So
Yeah.
sometimes they wake up in the morning and they want to start something like that, but I want to get their schoolwork done and I want them to play later in the day. Um, so like I really love their passion for making stories and stuff. But how can I balance that? Like, I can't just let them play the whole day. I
Sure.
want to have a routine.
Right.
So
Okay. So
I
the
also
question
don't
was
want to. Yeah.
that your kids really love imaginative play and they like to do it all day, but you need to get your schoolwork done, right?
Yeah.
That was the question. Okay. So what I would suggest, and I'm going to let other people also chime in because there's so many resources on here right now, is one, maybe make that imaginative play part of your schooling. I mean, I'm seeing writing in there. I'm seeing so many things going on. You can even do math with imaginative play. There's so many things you can do. And even if they start their day with it, I think that's great. Like starting their day off with them being happy instead of sulking and doing something they don't want to do, that might actually be a great start. Maybe put a time limit on it, put a timer on and say, okay, I'm giving you 30 minutes. Or say you better be done by be done by 10 o'clock and then we start. Those are some of my suggestions, but if anyone else, I'd love to hear everyone else's suggestions for Ishana. You could just unmute if you're there.
I would add also if they're doing any activities or something like that, and that's what's making you want to hurry up the other academics, that you could, give them the option that if they do their imaginative play for a long time, then the other activities, like if you're doing swimming or anything else that, sometimes you have to leave home early, then, you have to cut that out. Like they would have to pick, a long imaginative play. Definitely give them some time. I would say at least half an hour to do that when they wake up, so they're like warmed up and happy. But if it's going beyond what you think you need to do for their other academic work, then give them the option of maybe not doing, I don't know, maybe there's not even activities, maybe there's something else you do at home, like watch TV or a movie or something like that. That
That's
they would have to pick.
Yeah. I just, her suggestion has made me realize that what you can also do is let them take breaks with it. So you can say, okay, like you started this, let's go to math. Okay, you can go back to it, right? Or you can do a read aloud while they set up their play area, for their imaginative play area as well. So it doesn't feel like, it's like wasted time. Put on.
I was just going to add the same thing, kind of off of what you were saying, Ayesha, that for my kids, especially when they were a lot younger, it was really hard for them to just start like bookwork right away, or like anything that's like brain heavy. Although I like to start with that first thing, just when they're still fresh and whatnot, and take advantage of the morning. But I would always start with read aloud. And so they would get out, their Legos, Tinker Toys, Magnetiles, whatever it is they were building with. For whatever reason, they would have breakfast and they would just want to hit the floor and start playing. And so any sort of imaginative play, like building, creating, anything that they wanted to do with their hands, they got to get that out of their system first. And then meantime, I was reading aloud, usually the arrow that we had that month or whatever it was. And so, by the time that was all done and we got other read alouds done, it was like an hour into the morning already. They got all that out of their system. And then now we could be like, okay, let's do some table time right now. Let's get started. And I think that's what Julie recommended. That's where I kind of got that idea. That's how she would start her mornings. And it worked out really well for us because they got to get the play out of their system. They don't feel like they're being thrown from like breakfast to straight to math, you know, or whatever heavy, you know, brain work they need to do. And then you're still getting, you know, stuff checked off of your list too.
So Angie, I don't know if you know, but you mentioned this like a couple months ago, one of our book club meetings about the read aloud, and we started doing it, and it's been such a benefit to us. So we also start our day with read aloud, and it's like the best thing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I know it's one of my favorite, like,
Yeah.
Because the other thing too is we don't necessarily have a morning basket, but I'm sure if you go on YouTube and type in like homeschool morning basket, like there's like 7,000 videos that pop up. So if you do anything like that, where you want to incorporate, like say their picture book read alouds for science, or you have like a hadith book that we would read from sometimes, or tafsir of a surah, or whatever it is, you could throw all of that in that time frame, because you can just read aloud to them that entire time. And you'd be hitting all these subjects, and they have no idea. They're just, oh, that's cool, mom. Like, oh, volcanoes, oh, whatever. And they're just going along their day. And you're just like knocking things off your list, basically.
That's great. I know Teacher Mehmet said on IG, she has some songs and surahs that signal beginning of school. So she just starts and they usually join eventually. I love that. That's one of the perfect things, right? Like you do it and hopefully they join. I've done that a few times and it's great. Like I'll just bring worksheets or I'll start like coloring or something. And they'll be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, nothing. I'm just doing this. Like, oh, can we do it? I'm like, sure, join in. It's a great tactic and it works most of the time unless they figure out what you're doing. So any other questions, either related or not related to the chapter that we read?
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
So I have a question. They have their breakfast and get the play or anything out of their system. Do you suggest they start with their favorite subjects or the least favorite subjects? Like, for example, math, let's say it takes so long. Do you suggest that they start with the math, or they, if they do, like, let's say the grammar, they prefer the grammar, let them do the grammar first? So.
Okay, I have my opinion, but does anyone else want to say something?
We just started something new this year, but I mean, it depends how old the child is. But for my 12-year-old now, we started doing like a Trello board. So we have his subjects that, you know, that need to get done, and then he decides in what order he moves them from in progress to complete. So he has a list. As long as they get done during the day, he decides the order that he does them, and he moves them over throughout the day, and then when it's done, he's done. So it helps him. I mean, for older kids, that would work, depending on, you know, what kind of mood he's in. He feels like he has more control over the subjects. But for younger kids, I mean, you could do a similar thing. I know a friend who does the same thing with Post-it notes. Like, she puts the Post-it notes with each subject on there, and she gets to move the Post-it notes over to, you know, another spot on the wall when she's finished with that activity, and it gives her some control. And they also have this desire to like move over all the notes, so it might work for some kids.
That's a great idea, Zara. Can you type what that is called exactly? Like what's that system called?
Yeah, sure. I'll put it in the box.
Thank you so much. So I guess I kind of follow that, where I give them a checklist of what I would like them to get done that day, and then they are free to do whatever they want from that checklist. Sometimes it's the easiest, sometimes they want to get done with the hardest. So it really just depends. But the best advice I got was from Farial, actually, when we first started homeschooling. So it was like a really long time ago. And she said, always start your day with Qur'an. And I think that was like the best advice, because it's such a good start to your day. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. But if you can get your Qur'an done early, you know, as your first subject, it really helps to get everything else moving. And even if you do nothing else the rest of the day, at least the Qur'an was done, right? Alhamdulillah. Zara mentioned that I think it's an app or a website, was Trello.com. That's TRELLO.com, the Post-it note system. Hi, Tea with Farah mentioned that we start with Qur'an and then play, and then math, and then play. We do science or history in the afternoon. Most times we start with a math game or math and movement. That's a great idea. It's always good to have that, you know, adding that movement that we talked about in the chapter. Any other suggestions for Walad, how to get that day started? Okay, any other questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
I have a question. So last year I was homeschooling. This year we're doing a remote learning, and I already know my son doesn't like it.
Okay.
But it's just sort of our situation that we're in. So anyways, I let him play with Legos sometimes when they're sitting and he's like listening to a story and he's online with his teacher. I mean, there's been days where I've just sort of let go and he's just built his own fort and done things like that while he's listening. But I just feel like their work is too much for him. Like there's sometimes what I'll do is I'll I'll write things for him if it's really long, so he doesn't feel overwhelmed, and I say just trace what I wrote down,
Right.
and things like that. I don't know, any ideas like on how to maybe troubleshoot for him, because I don't know, I feel like I know like he doesn't have the words, he can't, like I know it, I know like what's going on with him, and it's so like, but he's sort of like, he probably feels stuck, you know.
So with remote schooling, he has to get done like a certain number of like, let's say worksheets or something, right? Like he has to get done with like a checklist of his own.
Yeah, like he has a
Okay.
certain amount of work he has to do, like writing or
Okay. And how old is he?
pages and stuff. He's 7.
He's 7. Okay. Does anyone want to give some advice to Amy? So her son is remote schooling and the list seems to be long, I guess. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, like sometimes it's like yeah, the work, or even I have to literally sit with him,
Yeah.
and help him in all of his classes. So, you know, there's, yeah.
That's tough. Does
Yep.
anyone have any suggestions?
I didn't realize that. It's just that it's a virtual schooling and it's a lot of things to do the whole day online.
Yeah, so like he's pretty much all morning in so he'll go to like Arabic, then he'll go to Islamic studies, then he'll go to um his academics. And they try to take breaks in between, but
I'm going to repeat the question one more time for those that want to help out on IG. The question was that her son is remote schooling and there's like a certain number of things he needs to get done for school. So how can we troubleshoot or help? How can she help him do it better, or not do it better, but get it all done? Maybe be efficient.
yeah, be more efficient and like focus on what he needs to get done. I mean, they have all the rewards and things like that, but
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe as a mom, you can kind of maybe figure out what that skill is that they're learning and then take away all the other skills. For example, when you're doing math, when you're doing math worksheets, maybe you can write it down for him. He's doing math in his head, but you're actually writing it out. That might help make it go faster because math is a combination of writing and the actual math computation, right? So if you take out the writing portion because you want him to focus on the math part, that might help it go faster as well. That's just one idea that I have.
Yeah.
Because I don't know
No,
if
that's what I was I that's what I'm thinking. Maybe I should just like, you know, talk to him while we're doing it and make sure he's understanding what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then writing it down for him so it's not so overwhelming. Because I feel like he's getting overwhelmed.
And 7, I think, at least with my kids, with my 2, they were never independent at 7. Again, that was for my 2. They still needed a lot of like a lot of me like being with them and the support.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was helpful or if anyone else has any other suggestions.
No, that was helpful. Thank you. I just wanted to ask because I wanted to see like if I was sort of thinking in the right directions. I do play games and I try to connect with him in between, or like make him go on the swing, or you know, I do like those things.
You're kind of home remote schooling.
Yeah, it's not that I would love to homeschool him, you know, and just read a book and start that. Those sound like really, maybe someday, you know, that sounds really amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So we'll,
It's a good start though. Someone mentioned that remote school is hard because they want to cover so many subjects, collaborating with the child and just having him do as much as he can. And then someone else commented, sometimes bringing in some foods or favorite things might help. That's a great way actually to motivate, to help him like get through it. And then
Yeah.
someone said I wouldn't push him to do all his busy work. That's a great one because I think a lot of times schools are culprits to busy work, right? So maybe figure out what's actually what is he actually learning and what does he not need to learn. But I know schools are different rules and to what needs to be done and worksheets and stuff like that. So you do what's best for you and your child, obviously.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
What grade is your son?
He's in first. Yeah. I put him in first so he doesn't feel so overwhelmed with all the work and stuff.
I mean, I just feel like it's maybe hard for, like, it's not even something that's necessarily possible for a young child to be sitting at a computer and getting everything done. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are thrown into virtual schooling, but it's not necessarily something that is, going to work. And I would just say, just try to do the best that you can. And I'm sure he's still learning being at home with you, with the other things you guys do together.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, this is all new for him. And last year, like I was very relaxed with him and we were still learning. And so like this, yeah. So there's some days like I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it go. I'm not gonna, because I don't want to force him and then he won't like it, and he'll get that energy from me. And then so some days I'm just like, whatever. Exactly. I'm like, I'm gonna sit on the couch and nurse my baby because that's what I have to do right now. So I let him build a pillow fort outside and take his class with his computer out there. So I mean, it is what it is. So
well, we had a comment on IG that says, "You got this, Amy," and I agree.
Thanks.
There's lots of dua because honestly, having a baby and a 7-year-old, and I don't know if you have more kids, but you're doing great. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it's about 8:57, so we're going to wrap this up. Inshallah, our next book club is going to be on the second Tuesday in November. And the next chapter is chapter 7, Applying the Superpowers. We're going to do the whole chapter. We're hoping to finish this book and maybe start another one, inshallah. So that's the goal. And we're also hoping to be back and being more consistent with these. So I hope you all can join us. I hope this was beneficial for you all. If you have any questions or comments, please email us or leave some notes in the comments. And we'll see you all next month, inshallah.
Do you guys know what the book is going to be?
No, we'll take suggestions.
Okay.
This still has a while. I'm wondering if we can even combine chapters, but I mean, there's so much in each chapter. It's so hard to do that. Yeah, so we'll stick with just one we'll continue to do one chapter at a time and we'll go from there, inshallah. Okay then, until next time, assalamu alaikum.